Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today's topic looks at demand and supply, and we are going to look at demand and supply in connection with economic statistics. So the essence of this lecture is to show which aspects of demand and supply, especially with the plotting of the curves of demand and supply, apply to economic statistics and which ones apply to economic dynamics. So it's something that will help us understand what economic dynamics are and what economic statistics are. I hope you enjoy this lecture. Let's delve in. So the topics that we're going to look at are the interaction of demand and supply, and look at equilibrium. Then we're going to look at how the market forces of supply and demand play a role in the determination of prices in the market. We'll also look at excess demand or a shortage, how it's created, and how equilibrium can be restored in the market. Then we'll look at excess supply or a surplus. We'll look at how it is actually created and how an equilibrium can be restored in the market. And we need to bear in mind that throughout this lecture, we'll often be referring to statistics and dynamics. Okay, let's look at the interaction of demand and supply. It's important that we understand that every market has the demand and the supply side. And these demand and supply side have corresponding demand and supply schedules. Of course, we know that in a schedule, you're going to have the data or the information that you need on the prices in the market of a particular good, and then the quantities that are demanded at each particular price level, or at each particular price rather, okay? So with the information that you have, you can plot the demand and supply curves. Then we need to know that these demand and supply curves often interact at a point that we refer to as the equilibrium point. And it is through the interaction of demand and supply that the market forces of supply, or rather that the prices in the market are actually dictated. Okay, so these are some of the things that we need to be aware of as we proceed in this lecture. This is a model of an equilibrium market. So as you can see in the diagram, we have the equilibrium point. It's labeled, I'm sure you can see it. And then we have the demand curve, DD, supply curve, SS. We also have the equilibrium price, which is PE, and equilibrium quantity, which is QE. So this refers to an equilibrium market. Now we need to understand that this is a static model. This is where the statistics actually apply. Because as you can see, there is no movement in this model of an equilibrium market. Okay, so it's a static model. Now let's proceed. Here is another graph that talks about excess demand. We know that when we talk about excess demand, we are talking about a state of disequilibrium. And since it's a state of disequilibrium, then it means that the dynamics are in play. The reason being that, as you can see on this particular diagram, we have the equilibrium price, PE, and we have the equilibrium quantity. But in addition to the equilibrium quantity, we also have the quantity demanded and quantity supplied. So in this particular graph, you can see that the actual price, which is P, is lower than the equilibrium price. So when you have this situation, it means that you have excess demand or you have a shortage. That is to say, what has been supplied on the market is less than what is being demanded. Okay? So the natural consequence of a situation like this is that the prices will start rising because there are more people demanding your product, but then what is on the market is little, so it cannot satisfy the demand that is on the market. As a result, more people need these products and the prices will start rising, moving towards the equilibrium point. So you're going to have the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity restored. Okay, that is a situation where what has been supplied is just equal to what is being demanded, and then the market will be stable. That is, there will be equilibrium once again. We also have excess supply. Under excess supply, we need to know that we have a state of disequilibrium because, like you can see, the quantity demanded, that is QD, is way too low than the quantity supplied, which is QS. Now, when this happens, we have a situation where there is a surplus, that is in terms of the goods that have been supplied on the market. And every time you have a surplus, the implication is that the prices will start going down because there's just too much on the market, and wherever the sellers are, they'll be competing for the few customers that are on the market. So because everybody wants to sell, then what will happen is that the prices will start going down, moving towards the equilibrium point. So you're going to have the price PE from the actual price of P, and then the quantity will fall to QE from the original quantity supplied of QS. So that will actually restore equilibrium in the market because the quantity demanded will move back to QE from QD. So you're going to have a state of equilibrium, which applies to statics. But the current position that we have on the diagram, this can be referred to as dynamics. Okay, this is economic dynamics because there is movement. Okay, which is aimed at restoring equilibrium in the market. So we need to understand that in our study of excess demand and excess supply, or demand and supply, we have dynamics and statics at play. Okay, so this is actually the essence of this lecture, so that we understand how the market forces of supply and demand can actually interact to bring about a state of equilibrium. And at the same time, depending on the prevailing situation in the market, you can have excess supply, you can also have excess demand, or a shortage and a surplus. I hope you followed this lecture, and I hope we understand what dynamics are, what statics are, then how equilibrium is restored, how excess demand comes about, excess supply, and how these can actually be eliminated in the market so that you have a state of equilibrium which is more lasting compared to excess demand or excess supply. Okay, so it's important that we understand that there's a state of disequilibrium and a state of equilibrium. So with this, I hope we've enjoyed this lecture, and I guess I'm going to see you next time. Bye.